One day I got a call. A meeting was arranged. A big suitcase appeared on the table. When I saw what was in the suitcase, I thought, no way. Unbelievable. Around 7 billion. We're talking real estate, gold, secret foreign accounts. The suitcase belonged to a comrade that today hardly anyone has heard of, who had acted in secret, Wolfgang Laniczka. Only later did I realize he was one of Germany's greatest financial magicians of the 20th century. Laniczka played a leading role in hiding national assets, millions, even billions. I was never able to ask Laniczka about it, unfortunately, because something happened in Switzerland, something unimaginable. Laniczka was often in Lugano, where many of the SED's secret accounts were. He'd left his hotel and was walking across a crosswalk. A Fiat Uno came around the corner and hit him. Laniczka was dead. I don't know. We don't have to speculate whether it was murder. $3.3 million, 7 million, 4.2 million. Unbelievable. I don't even know if you can call it a financial scandal. It was more than that. It was something else. It was basically theft. Back in communist East Germany, and when the Berlin Wall fell, I had no idea how much money there was. That the SED had assets worth billions, secured for the party caste. All hidden from the public eye. No one knew about it. These comrades were taking home bags and bags of money. Small amounts, large amounts, millions of euros, hundreds of thousands. You could just put out your hand and get money. Just how much money had changed hands eventually became clear. The gigantic sum of 417 million East German marks. Almost 3 tons of banknotes. I always wondered, where did all those billions go? What was done with it? So much money can't just disappear. And what I found was unbelievable. My name is Peter Wędzierski. I've been a journalist for over 40 years. In the late 70s, I reported for several years from communist East Germany. For a West German journalist, it was very exciting to see what was really going on behind the grey facade that the country showed to the outside world. That typical stench of two-stroke engines burning both oil and gas hung in the air everywhere. This is interesting. The building to the right housed the Central Committee of the SED, the House of 1,000 Windows, as it was called. That was the nerve centre, the real centre of power in the country, where all the decisions were made.
But the country run by the SED eventually collapsed. The Berlin Wall fell on November 9, 1989, 28 years after it was built. The final push. Tens of thousands of the small socialist country's 17 million inhabitants had already fled that summer. And in October, at great personal risk and without official permits, began calling for a new German Democratic Republic. For many, a new era had dawned. One that they would never have thought possible, and that earned them a place in history.
My name is Gregor Gysi. I was born in Berlin in 1948, and I lived in East Germany from the beginning of its existence to the end of its existence. I became a member of the Socialist Unity Party of Germany, the SED, in 1967, the state party of East Germany. Everything in Gregor Gysi's life came about by coincidence, with the exception of a career as a lawyer.
In November 1989, Gregor Gysi was not a well-known figure. Not even I knew who he was. But he later played an important role in the great game of hide-and-seek the SED was playing.
I came to politics by chance. Demonstrations were always taking place. I was approached by two actresses, asking what was allowed and what was not, etc. I said, what I don't understand is that no one ever tries to hold a legal rally. You can apply for a permit. And that's what we did. And then came the next coincidence. They called me and said, the rally is November 4th at Alexanderplatz. And since it was your idea, you should be the first to speak, after the actors have said their piece. Unlike others, I support the leading role of the party, but I am completely against its autocracy. There should no longer be a single leader. It shouldn't be without democratic control, no absolutist rule, and no personality cult ever again.
The SED was on the ropes. The old guard surrounding Erich Honecker had resigned. A new old man had assumed leadership, Egon Krenz. But the power of the country's once almighty state was dwindling day by day. Many were desperately trying to secure their livelihoods and seizing whatever opportunity they could.
In December 1989, some of the party functionaries were already thinking about how they could hide their money. Lists of comrades show they had thousands in foreign currency, i.e. West German Deutschmarks. The crazy thing was that another part of the party was naive enough to believe that the best way to salvage the party and improve its image was to take an honest approach.
In early December, the more honest party officials decided that what was needed was someone to tackle the abuse of office and corruption. And the only credible person for the job was Gregor Gysi, the lawyer who'd given a speech on November 4th. People trust him.
The formation of a joint commission of inquiry has been agreed. The commission is to investigate and uncover abuses of office and corruption.
I had to figure out how to form the commission.
The phone started ringing at 7:30 in the morning. I knew it was Gysi. "I'm here at Wehrischer Platz," he said. "You have to come. You have to set up a commission." So off I went, and there he was, sitting in this massive room with wood paneling. He was sitting behind a desk that made him look tiny. "It's all so huge," I said. "Awful."
I walked around wondering what now. I first decided we needed to seal off all the offices of the Politburo members. And secondly, the finance department.
Change is afoot in the Central Committee building in East Berlin. Key units are now under the control of the Provisional Party leadership. The old functionaries no longer have access to their safes, and every briefcase is reportedly being checked. Whether these belated measures against corruption and cover-ups can appease public anger is unclear.
We got tons of tips, all kinds. Threats, denunciations. We were looking for properties and so on.
For example, we took a close look at purchases in Wandlitz. That's where the Politburo was. All the members of the Politburo lived there. A shop there, if I remember correctly, sold flour and sugar from East Germany, but everything else was from the West. That was so disappointing because they always told the general public that East German products were so great, but all they themselves wanted was Western stuff.
But our research into corruption in Wandlitz yielded nothing. We kept going. We were there from dawn to dusk, sifting for evidence. We found nothing about foreign currencies. We somehow missed it. They didn't show it to us.
But then I realized something I'd never have thought possible. What I didn't know was that foreign currency, i.e. dollars, West German Deutschmarks and so on, were not managed by the tax department, but what was called the clearance department. If I'd known that, I would have sealed those rooms too.
The person responsible for foreign currency, for the SED's Western money, was Alexander Schalk-Golakowski.
The former State Secretary for Commercial Coordination, Alexander Schalk-Golakowski, is being sought.
The Foreign Ministry in East Berlin has requested assistance from European countries as well as states in the Middle East and Latin America.
Außerdem untersucht der Militäroberstaatsanwalt der DDR das ganze Ausmaß des widerrechtlichen Waffenhandels.
Rumors about high sums of money. 100 billion West German Deutschmarks are said to be deposited in Swiss accounts.
Nobody really knew what to believe. I remember there was a lot of anger. A lot of people felt it was plausible and very likely to be true.
The Central Committee submitted its resignation. The Politburo has made its decision.
The SED had indeed lost a lot of power. The SED had to decide, should it give up or try to reinvent itself?
Good evening. What's next for the SED? This is the question dominating the SED Party Congress, which began 2.5 hours ago in Berlin.
After calls for the SED to reform, debate within the party has become increasingly heated.
I am here as a representative of my comrades to demand the dissolution of the party. I am not alone in this point of view.
We will not be able to get rid of this stink very quickly.
For me, the party meeting was all over the place. Sometimes it was still just the SED, and sometimes it was sheer chaos.
Dear comrades, in my opinion, dissolving the party and reforming it would be a catastrophe. By what right should we all deprive ourselves of a political home? I also have to point out that there are legal consequences. Dissolving the party would mean all the employees of its apparatus would be out of a job. The lives of employees of party-owned companies and institutions would be at risk. The party's properties would initially be ownerless. Several new parties would then most certainly be launched and would enter into the legal dispute over succession.
No one knew how much the party's assets were worth. The SED was considered one of the largest parties in Europe. And, as was later discovered, it was also one of the richest. Its wealth was estimated at 6.2 billion East German marks at its demise, excluding a total 1,700 properties, publishing houses, foreign trade companies, and an unclear amount of foreign currency, possibly hundreds of millions.
Some of these party assets came from shady sources. Prisoners made furniture for the West. Patients in East German hospitals sometimes served as guinea pigs for the West German pharmaceutical industry. This took place in Charles Golakowski's watch, under the aegis of the so-called Pharmaceutical Institute and the SED. A lot of money was earned. Blood reserves of East German citizens were sold to Switzerland and other countries. Money was also made by selling political prisoners. Gregor Gysi should have said something.
Why should party assets go to the state?
The party has to address this.
Radical or not at all, otherwise there's no point.
It's about buildings and assets.
The state's hungry for foreign currency and they're hoarding it?
Gysi justified it. I would have thought that they would dissolve the party and start a new one. But if that doesn't work, it doesn't work. There has to be a compromise.
It was ultimately about renaming the SED and then about who would be in charge.
They suggested me. I thought they weren't serious. After the work on corruption, I'd go back to being a lawyer and do my job. But then in the weakest moment of my life, I said yes.
To be honest, I didn't see Gregor Gysi as someone who might one day be leader of the party. To me, that came as a surprise. But I gave him my vote.
Comrade Gregor Gysi is the new chairman of the party with 95.32% of the votes.
"30 minutes ago, the party announced its new name, although it's not that new. It's now called the Socialist Unity Party of Germany, Party of Democratic Socialism, abbreviated to SED-PDS.
The party meeting in December, where Gregor Gysi was appointed party leader, was a disappointment. Despite all the lip service, everything continued much as before. What was particularly unfortunate was that it became clear that without the SED's money and assets, there was no future.
Gregor Gysi und seine Leute haben ja
in the first weeks and months, Gregor Gysi and his people began redistributing what I call the treasures of the working classes.
Geld breitflächig verteilt haben.
Small and large amounts, millions, hundreds of thousands.
Party treasurer Wolfgang Pohl came to me and said, "Some people are in serious trouble. May I give these decent, long-standing comrades a loan?" I had no problem with that.
3.3 million, 7 million. This money was handed over personally, in cash. This is one of the bags with which, after you got the checks at the Central Committee of the SED, you could go and pick up your cash at the Handelsbank. You needed fairly large bags to carry away the cash. During my research, I relied on lists of money handovers, lists of slush money payments to straw men, and they were long. I could just put my finger somewhere on the list and say, I'll take a closer look at this case now. To take an example, one of the names I followed up on led me to a man who had pocketed 15 million. The trail led to a rundown house somewhere near Kreuzberg and Schöneberg in West Berlin. I rang the bell in the courtyard for an apartment on the second floor, and the very man from the list opened the door. I asked him what he'd done with the 15 million he'd collected a few weeks ago. His attitude was, it was for the party. I didn't do it for myself. I'm a leftist comrade. I was keeping this money for the party.
The principle behind the loans was simple. I get money, sign a contract stating that I am managing the money in trust, and will at some point pay it back to the party. If I use the money to establish a company, I sign a contract declaring that these business shares do not personally belong to me, but are merely being held by me in trust. In trust, fiduciary sounds truly noble.
The thing is, when you give money to so many people, unfortunately, after a while, they might lose it. One of my favorite stories is about the fisherman's paradise in Chemnitz. Someone got money from these SED assets, bought an old villa, and opened a business, the Fisherman's Paradise. When the business started to struggle, he turned the villa into a hotel. Then when the hotel didn't work out, he made it into a restaurant. And when that also failed, a demolition company was listed at the address. Later, when I went to have a look, something strange had happened. Big limousines were parked there, bodyguards were walking around. It had become a brothel. That was the end of the Fisherman's Paradise. And the money was gone. The owner disappeared. But for most people, it was worth it. If you look around, there are people who did real estate deals, founded companies, adapted seamlessly to capitalism, from comrade to capitalist.
Mr. Gysi, you have often been asked about the SED's assets, and you still haven't responded. You've said that you still don't know. Is it because of the scale of what you would have to reveal? Money, buildings, media?
You know, the problem is still, on the one hand, simpler, and on the other hand, more complicated.
Here, for example, Laniczke writes to Paul, valuables from Safe 28 are to be removed and secured. When we talk about the treasures of the working classes, what we mean is Safe 28 in the Central Committee of the SED. When Laniczke opened Safe 28, we got a big surprise. Gold coins and gold pieces, ruble coins, commemorative coins, silver bars, gold bars, expensive gold watches, even dental gold for the Politburo, 325,609 Deutschmarks and US dollars too, 325,483 US dollars and 4.1 million East German marks. Like the cave of Aladdin and his magic lamp. When it was opened, it was all there, and then it was gone. Altogether, quite a considerable sum was handed over to the party, to the PDS Finance Department, from this one single safe.
In January 1990, the SED-PDS was still the strongest party in the country. SED-PDS comrades still dominated the government. But their power was eroding. A first real democratic election was held on May 6th. Gregor Gysi and his party comrades were aware that their chances of winning were slim.
They were under time pressure. It was clear that all the money from the SED had to disappear within less than 6 months.
The election campaign began in January 1990. All parties had to disclose their finances to ensure that the election campaign was a level playing field. All the parties disclosed their finances. But the SED-PDS's representative said he couldn't. Then he collapsed, and a break had to be taken. He started crying. And then he confessed to me that the evening before, a finance official had burned a whole bunch of documents. I had to issue a warning that if the SED-PDS was not prepared to disclose its finances, it would not be admitted to the election. They did eventually present some figures, which we couldn't verify, but ended up accepting. At that point, no one, including myself, had any idea of the scale of the real figures.
Here, for example, Wolfgang Laniczke wrote to Wolfgang Pohl about the PDS assets. Dear Comrade Paul, due to the political situation that has arisen, an expropriation of assets of the PDS can no longer be ruled out. To secure the remaining Deutschmark holdings at the Handelsbank, I proposed that 40 million marks be deposited in foreign banks on numbered accounts set up by middlemen. The preparations have been made, and this procedure is completely safe. The PDS is able to access the funds at any time through the middlemen. They knew they were doing something criminal, because there are repeated warnings to watch out. It has to look like this. It can't look like this. It must appear legal. A money laundering mafia was clearly at work.
As a foreign journalist, you were often just astonished. I had a second home with an office in East Berlin on Leipziger Straße on the 10th floor. I had a very quiet neighbor. Now and then we'd wait for the elevator together. Of course, I'd be friendly and say hello. As an Austrian, I always tried to be friendly. But he was always very grumpy and would look away and mumble something. There was no name on his door, no bell. It was kind of puzzling, but I didn't question it. But once I was surprised to see him at a gas station in an armored Mercedes. Only later did I find out from the magazine Der Spiegel what kind of person he was. The man's name was Abdel Younes, a Palestinian and a central figure for the SED. He had several passports and identities, as a Jordanian businessman, as a Syrian diplomat. He was a major arms dealer.
Here, 11 million, then another 9 million to him, then another 6 million. I looked into him. I wanted to find out who this Mr. Younes was, and what he did, and what happened to the money. I once visited an industrial wasteland where companies were supposed to be based. It was not transparent. It wasn't easy to follow. It took a lot of research. He
had the very exciting task of distributing the SED's assets and making them disappear. The man would have been extremely stressed.
Abdel Younes also organized trips. They did some strange things back then. They did guided tours of East Berlin with SED party officials. There were also organized trips to Cuba and much more. It was a setup that sort of replaced the official East German travel agency. That was my impression. Mr. Younes was also given 3 former guest houses, equipped with a loan of 52 million marks. These were not just any old guest houses. These were 3 large, extremely lucrative properties with 120 employees. For example, in Wandlitz, on the lake. He was supposed to keep them in business.
He also founded an Islamic community, very quickly with a few relatives who were Muslims. He got millions in donations from the SED. He also got expenses paid in advance for 3,000 business trips.
Obviously, I wondered why Mr. Yunus received loans of this size. The answer was that in communist East Germany, the Islamic communities never had a home. It was a sort of reparation. He could set up a mosque.
But Mr. Yunus took a week to cash the 75 million check. On June 6, a day that later became problematic for him.
The issue of PDS assets remains controversial. How much is now to be set aside for basic funding is currently unclear. Gysi says 2, his deputy 4, and a former Stasi officer estimates the assets at 50 to 60 billion marks. The guessing continues.
Of course, I knew beforehand that there were membership fees. I knew that the party had printing houses and that it owned publishing houses. Then I discovered the SED actually owned an entire village, including the church. I was on TV. I think it was on Friday or Saturday. And I was asked,
Mr. Gysi, just one question. Is it true that...
May I answer the question first?
80% of the printing capacities are in the hands of the SED in terms of ownership?
In my opinion, even more. If all this had been paid for from membership fees, it would have been all right, but it wasn't. I said all this has to be transferred to public ownership.
The party leader has decided to part with some of the SED's money. 3 billion East German marks are to flow to the state.
We were able to make suggestions as to who should have what. I was satisfied with that, I have to be honest.
This was all just trickery. Money was transferred to the state budget, part of the money to quiet the public, critics in the media, so to speak. Look, we have parted with some things. That distracted from what was going on behind the scenes. There was not only money and assets in East Germany. The SED also had many companies and even real estate in West Germany and other European countries.
There were some very dubious connections to Austria.
Many party leaders didn't even know which companies East Germany had in the West. These were secret and operated under names that divulged very little.
That's when the name Rudolfine Steindling, so-called Red Fini, came up, along with Novum. Rudolfine Steindling was the managing director of this company. It was white-collar crime. Novum arranged East German business with the West, illegally, behind the Iron Curtain. It moved billions, all organized by Red Fini. The big question was, who really owned Novum? Since Rudolfine Steindling was managing director, everyone naturally thought the company belonged to her. But they were wrong. She made a statement that made clear that Novum belonged to a party, the SED. She had been working as a trustee for the SED the whole time, and very well.
It was mainly financial.
Thanks to Steindling, Novum became very important. She was very tough, very energetic, and probably a bit bossy, but also very charming. Novum had about 500 million Deutschmarks in its accounts in 1990. This money would have normally flowed back to the SED, but Rudolfine Steindling was asked to make that fortune disappear quickly.
This is when arguably the most breathtaking transaction in international money transfers occurred.
Rudolfine Steindling transferred hundreds of millions of Deutsche Marks to Switzerland, and from there quickly transferred large parts back to a neutral account in Austria. Clever, because at some point investigators would inevitably look into that Swiss account. But by then, the Austrian account would have long been emptied. Very small portions of it were now in anonymous securities accounts and savings accounts all over the globe. The only person who knew exactly where it was and who the beneficiaries were was Rudolfine Steindling. Investigators were left scratching their heads for decades.
In February 1990, no one looked too closely at what was going on in Austria. There were only 3 months left until East Germany's first free election. Only 3 months left to show whether the PDS could secure its power.
When I became party chairman, everyone said, well, maybe he can really reform the SED and change East Germany. But then that article with yellow headlines appeared, Der Drahtzieher, the mastermind.
What was happening was that people would turn to journalists and say, please report on this. Please look into what's going on. Many articles came about through complaints and statements from East German citizens who finally had access to a free press.
This meant that both the party and I became targets.
The people of Leipzig have once again taken to the streets.
Protesters claimed there'd been no real political change.
What we see is that the SED-PDS is consistently working to re-establish its former dominance by exploiting every means at its disposal.
Many are afraid.
Almost 100,000 people from the east have moved to West Germany since the beginning of the year. In February alone, 41,800 East German citizens left their homeland.
Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, the situation in our country, as you know, is increasingly fragile. To bring calm and stability to the political situation, I ask you to bring forward the elections for the People's Chamber to March 18th.
Bringing forward the election was an admission that the country was in turmoil. Within the party, there were hopes that there wouldn't be enough time for the public to get to know the other 23, mostly newly formed, small and large parties. But the PDS's coffers were also bursting.
I don't know of any party that managed to acquire so much money and, in the end, embezzle it and use it for itself and its political agenda.
The PDS has no shortage of funds for its campaign.
The PDS in East Berlin has 2 million marks available for the election campaign.
It was also about making sure that everyone had an equal chance to run their campaigns. We suspected that the PDS had a major advantage.
In 1 hour at 6 p.m, more than 22,000 polling stations will close. Overall, turnout is expected to be around 80%.
History is being made.
It is safe to say that the world is watching.
ARD's editor-in-chief has referred to an event on par with the media coverage of America's manned moon landing.
Nun sind sie da, die neuen Männer und Frauen, die dieses Land braucht. Wir haben heute gewählt. Es ist 18 Uhr.
It's 6 p.m. and we have the results of the exit polls.
Jawohl, da ist sie.
The CDU currently with 40%. The DSU 7%, DA 1%, the SPD 21%, the PDS 15%. Hardly anyone expected this, the CDU at 40%. If it holds, it will be the strongest party in East Germany. And according to our country's constitution, the strongest party appoints the Prime Minister.
They rushed to move the money along, to salvage it. Support was given to leftist movements abroad. From the PDS party executive, party finances section, a show of solidarity. One last solidarity measure. All these receipts are dated May. The problem for the PDS was that, as of June 1st, these things would no longer be possible. And June 1st was approaching.
Today, the East German parliament unexpectedly decided that the assets of all parties will immediately be placed under the trusteeship of an independent government commission. The new law is aimed above all at wrongfully acquired assets of the former ruling party, the SED.
By June 1st, everything would have been sorted out to the benefit of the East German people. The PDS now had a problem. It still had a lot of money, but hardly any legal ways left to secure it. They still tried anyway, not entirely legally. Someone went to a bank in Oslo to withdraw about 70 million. The bank became suspicious and called Germany to check if everything was above board. They could see it was an attempt to siphon away money.
Around 11 p.m. last night, police officers stormed PDS headquarters.
You must all remain inside. It will be decided who can leave and when. Please be patient.
I realized they were out for blood.
The SED's successor party is suspected of having embezzled 100 million marks.
For the PDS, things started spinning out of control. The Putnik deal. As a journalist, you were often surprised, but I was rarely as surprised as I was then.
Three of our people apparently thought we needed a little nest egg somewhere.
Langnitschke didn't line his own pockets. He was a loyal party soldier. He did everything for the party, and the party benefited. The materials I received after Wolfgang Langnitschke's death were very interesting. He often went to Lugano, where many of the secret accounts were. Langnitschke had always travelled to Lugano for years, if not decades, to withdraw cash and give it to leftist movements in the West. We're also talking about arms deals here. He and his wife were going out for dinner when they crossed a street and were hit by a Fiat Uno that was driving fast. I spoke to the driver afterwards, a 20-year-old man who said he'd been blinded by the sun, and that's why he ran into Langnitschke and his wife.
I will say this, it's at least a little strange when someone is simply run over and killed on a crosswalk in Switzerland. As for Wolfgang Langnitschke, his actions at the time when, among other things, the Putnik deal was concluded weren't particularly smart.
Langnitschke died in Lugano. I tried to speak to his wife, but she was very scared. The accident completely intimidated her, and she probably didn't know much about what her husband was doing. I've seen that time and time again, that Stasi wives weren't privy to their husbands' activities. It struck me how frightened she was.
Was mich beeindruckt hat, ist, dass sie so große Angst hatte.
It wasn't long before someone called about materials pertaining to the disappearance of the SED's funds. If I wanted to see the material, and yes, of course. And then eventually there I was in an apartment somewhere between Kreuzberg and Neukölln. A briefcase was on the table in front of me. And inside were all these original papers that Langnitschke had obviously taken and kept the whole time. Looking at them, I realized that this was the work of cunning financial wizards.
Man merkte, da sind dreiste Finanzjongleure am Werk.
The documents in the briefcase helped me to understand how the 1990 Putnik deal really went down.
Just stop. Yes, terrible.
One of the people involved in the disappearance of the SED's money, Mr. Kaufmann, was in Oslo at a bank trying to withdraw around 70 million marks. The bank was suspicious and called Germany to check whether everything was above board.
My phone rang around 7 p.m., launching the events of that dramatic night.
Of course, it was hugely damaging for us at the time.
I went straight over. It was on Keitstrasse, the fraud department, lots of detectives. I was given a pile of bank statements for a commercial account belonging to a company named Putnik. A significant sum of money had been transferred out of the account, including 70 million Deutschmarks that had ended up in Oslo. The bank there was highly suspicious. The account was in the name of a Karl-Heinz Kaufmann. His behavior was so unusual, the bank thought it was money laundering, drug trafficking, or arms dealing, and then inquired via Interpol about the account holders of the original account. The money came from PDS accounts.
The Putnik deal, one attempt to get assets out of Germany. The PDS claimed that its predecessor, the SED, had huge debts in the Soviet Union. The PDS claimed receipts of invoices for more than 107 million Deutschmarks, allegedly from the Russian company Putnik. The PDS transferred the money to a fake account belonging to the Putnik company in West Germany. From there, middlemen transferred it onto accounts in the Netherlands and Norway. Apparently, the party opted for banks in the West because the political situation in the USSR was too uncertain.
And then they pounced, thinking, no, this is an attempt to move money that doesn't belong to the PDS, and executed a search warrant the very same day, on the very same evening.
It wasn't just like a cloak and dagger operation, it was a true cloak and dagger operation. And it must have been rather scary when at 10:15 p.m. 150 armed police officers with bulletproof vests surrounded the PDS headquarters, but that wasn't all. The officers of PDS head Gysi and ex-Prime Minister Montreux were also searched, despite their immunity as parliamentarians.
That's clearly unlawful, of course.
But then the police find documents relating to the transfers to the Putnik company.
Gysi said, "Oh, you mean that? I'm aware of the transaction. It's all above board. There are contracts." "Yes, please show them to me. There must be other contracts and papers." He didn't have them. And then, who did it? Where are the papers? Comrade Langnitzke.
He brings the Putnik invoices to the party headquarters that same night.
Then I saw the letter for the first time with the words, "With communist greetings." It struck me as implausible for the time. It made me rather suspicious.
Things were unraveling for the PDS. The party headquarters was on its highest level of alert. It all started a year earlier, after the fall of the wall, in the fall of '89. East German citizens came to me, because I was known from TV and film reports, to tell me what things were really like.
Today in the pedestrian zone, what chances do people here give the SED?
No chance, and it won't get my vote, not in 100 years.
People had so many problems. The news came in thick and fast in early 1990.
The government of the German Democratic Republic calls on all citizens to remain calm and be prudent at this difficult time and to demonstrate civic awareness.
They break in despite all the warnings. That was the year of anarchy, 1990.
The demonstrators forced their way through the main gate onto the Stasi premises.
In the winter of 1989 and 1990, party bigwigs reportedly started to line their pockets. It was an El Dorado for all manner of opportunists from the old SED party network. The biggest coup being attempted by the comrades, the Putnik deal. Gysi turns to Moscow for help as soon as he hears about it.
I went straight to Moscow. There I spoke to Falin, head of the International Relations Department at the Communist Party Central Committee, and he told me, that company doesn't exist, or rather it does exist, but it's got nothing to do with this. The whole thing isn't true.
But in the meantime, the tide has turned in Moscow and Gorbachev doesn't back Gysi. Gorbachev's leadership team was no longer interested in officially confirming the existence of this company, Putnik, or that there were unpaid invoices. And Gysi must have been really upset when he came back to Berlin from Moscow.
I'm finding it difficult to describe my emotions right now, and I don't want to either. I want to make that clear and ask for your understanding.
The PDS leadership called a meeting, and he'd apparently already drafted his resignation. But it was decided that Paul and Langnitzke should take sole responsibility, and ultimately they were arrested.
PDS Treasurer Wolfgang Paul speaking to the media.
At a time when the party seemed especially vulnerable, its assets were increasingly under threat and the external political climate was becoming increasingly hostile, Comrade Wolfgang Langnitzke and I tried to salvage a basic reserve.
Einen bestimmten Grundstock von Mitteln für die Partei zu retten.
By his own admission, Karl-Heinz Kaufmann offered to use his many connections to help with this matter.
Als Helfer in dieser Sache an.
Karl-Heinz Kaufmann, den kannte ich schon aus.
I knew Karl-Heinz Kaufmann from my youth organization. Then in Berlin, they started saying it was Kaufmann who was supposed to get the cash out. And my response was, no way. He was always a bit confused. No one's dumb enough to give him the money. That was a bad idea. And just as I was on the phone with the Bild newspaper, discussing it, just as the Bild reporter was asking me about Kaufmann, and I was saying, nah, that can't be right, my wife called out from the living room. They're arresting Kaufmann in Oslo.
Der Kaufmann wird gerade in Oslo verhaftet.
In what could be the final chapter in the PDS financial scandal, Mr. Kaufmann from Halle was arrested in Oslo.
Apparently, 3 of our people wanted to create a nest egg somewhere. And so they fabricated a Soviet order, a demand, from party universities no less, which led to criminal proceedings.
After more than 40 days of hearings, the court ruled that defendants Paul and Langnitzke had harmed their party, and Karl-Heinz Kaufmann, the third member of the group, had incited them to do so.
The aim was to secure the money as quickly as possible.
Even if Gysi claims he didn't know anything about it, that's still, wow, issuing a power of attorney and then claiming to have known nothing as party chairman. Somehow that doesn't quite add up.
PDS leader as a witness in the financial trial. Gysi simply read an 8-page statement and refused to make any further comments. The lawyer invoked his right to refuse to testify as a member of parliament.
He was party chairman, and he can't really say either then or now, I've got nothing to do with it, I'm not responsible for it. And after the Putnik deal, he was apparently ready to resign, but didn't, because everyone was of course horrified at the thought of the party losing its figurehead, Gregor Gysi.
There was a profound mistrust, fueled by media claims that we were hiding money, etc.
One of the headlines I came up with was, "The treasures of the working classes." The message being, the treasures of the working classes were there, but no longer available to the working classes and population, only to the PDS.
Ultimately, the party controlled the assets. That's a little different from saying that they belonged to the party. But the party had control over them, and the party could decide who did what with which parts of the assets.
After the first free elections, the East German parliament decides to calculate the assets of the individual parties and no longer rely on voluntary disclosures. It votes to set up a commission which will put the PDS under enormous pressure.
After 2 readings and heated debates between the governing parties and the PDS, a majority vote approved the formation of an independent commission to uncover party assets and amend the party law. The commission, which is to be appointed by the Prime Minister, is to calculate the assets by June 30th and manage them in a trust.
They couldn't make this decision officially just against us, but against all East German organizations and parties, which is what they did. It's worded like an enabling act. This commission of the Prime Minister. That's what it says. It means that the governing parties can manage both their own assets as well as the opposition's. In other words, they intend to eliminate all opposition. That's the goal and nothing else. Take a closer look. The Prime Minister's commission can seize property and conduct house searches. Everything that's provided for in criminal procedural law, just like the police.
Yes, the pressure was on, and it was clear. All that SED money had to disappear.
And before the UKPV began its work. The Independent Commission of Inquiry, German acronym UKPV, was activated on June 1st, 1990. It was staffed with 10 honorary delegates, many of them lawyers. Representatives of all parties entering Parliament after the elections in March were sent to give evidence before the Commission, including members of the PDS, a source of irritation for some.
Gysi called me and said, "Hey, there's a commission and we need to set someone." I suggested you. So I wandered over to this parliamentary building and said, "Good morning, there's a commission here and I'm supposed to be on it." So I was led to a room where a few people were sitting around. They looked at me and said, "Yes, how can we help you?" I said, "I'm attorney Atman and Mr. Gysi sent me here. Apparently there's a commission here I'm supposed to work with." And of course, they were instantly friendly. They weren't thrilled at all.
The Commission of Inquiry initially didn't contact journalists. They also issued very few press releases. They took charge of the investigation, as prosecutors always do, and reporters were left out of the loop for a long time.
My name is Hans Andreas Schönfeld. I studied law in the East German era and earned my doctorate in international law. It was obvious to me that a lot of things had gone extremely wrong with the SED. just as in other organizations, that assets had been shifted, and I was determined to help find out.
So we sat there. We didn't have an office, we didn't have anything. We just sat in this room.
It was a tiny room full of pretty old furniture, and the only piece of equipment was a mechanical travel typewriter. That was the Commission's equipment.
It was busy. We constantly had meetings. They had to send us reports on anything they had. We didn't know how to get access. We needed to know what was there before we could deal with it.
There were 10 of us at the start. And then, after the 3rd of October, the Commission was expanded to 16 members.
We really did try our best, but working through boxes and boxes of documents was hard.
Most of the controversy surrounds the assets of the PDS.
Welche Summe nun als Grundstock anzulegen ist, darüber gibt es momentan nur Widersprüchliches. Gysi redet von 2, sein Stellvertreterbrief von 4 und ein ehemaliger Stasi-Offizier namens Petrus beziffert das Vermögen gar auf 50 bis 60 Milliarden Mark.
PDS treasurer Langnitzke also invented things that were allegedly paid for. In other words, bookings and transfers for non-existent purposes.
Buchungen, Umbuchungen für Zwecke, die es nicht gab.
May 1990 sees the sudden foundation of an Islamic religious association based in East Berlin. The association receives a windfall of 75 million marks from the party's assets. Its head is a certain Abdelmajid Younes, a Palestinian with Jordanian and Syrian papers.
The man was Palestinian. He had several passports and identities. Sometimes he was a Jordanian businessman, other times a Syrian diplomat, always with a different date of birth. He was a major arms dealer for the SED.
Files from the Federal Stasi Records Agency show that Younes was no stranger to the Security Ministry. Informants refer to him as a target for terrorism. A team from ARD confronts him.
We'd like to ask you about the SED's money.
That's ancient history from 10 years ago. They got it all back and more.
Why did Mr. Gysi trust you so much?
I never met or knew Mr. Gysi.
I don't think we ever met. Honestly, I don't remember. I don't know.
Younes was one of those shady figures who was never really touchable. He and PDS financial wizards like Wolfgang Langnitzke came up with the most creative ways to set money aside.
The ostensibly noble approach, promising to make everyone whole again, especially those who are Muslim, did not, I believe, hold up in the long run.
Ms. Young, here's an official document recognizing the Islamic Association. Are you familiar with this religious community?
I have absolutely no knowledge of it. A religious community of this kind was never established here in Berlin. There was no mosque association, no mosque. And accordingly, none of the community life that comes with such a community.
But he also received millions in donations from the SED for it. He also got expenses paid in advance for 3,000 business trips.
Abdel Younes receives the check for 75 million Ostmarks on the 31st of May. He's supposed to cash it at the State Bank the very same day, because the commission takes effect on June the 1st, making the transaction illegal. But he waits a week.
Abdel
Younes cashes the check a few days too late, because the Commission of Inquiry had already begun its work. This was a criminal offense.
Some of the money was recovered, some of it wasn't. He then went into hiding. He definitely remained in Germany for a while. I never saw him again.
A term you may not be familiar with yet, state crime. This is how the Berlin police describe crimes committed during the reunification process in the governmental circles of the former East Germany. The damage is estimated at tens of billions.
We then found out quite a lot in great detail, on the one hand through the Commission, and also through the Central Office Investigating State Crime, known by the acronym CERF.
The ZERF people are highly trained detectives with totally different resources at their disposal than the UKPV. They were expected to uncover some shocking revelations.
At the end, I was head of the counterfeit money department. The department also dealt with weapons, so I had sufficient experience in that area.
Here on the left, we've got one of the main state security ministry buildings, the Foreign Espionage Directorate known as the HVA, which spied on the West. But they had even more real estate, and a key clue followed up by ZERF led there, Case 106.
Case 106 basically concerned a criminal complaint filed by a Berlin citizen against another person who was born and raised in the East. He was alleged to be an employee of an East German secret service and to have potentially embezzled SED funds. At some point, this kind, good person appeared and put a stack of handwritten evidence on the table for us to look at.
Beweismittel auf den Tisch gelegt zur Auswertung. Da ist die Rede von Raub.
It contained details of robbery, details of currency offences, 35 tons of Libyan dinars in sacks in the basement of the HVA.
Dinare in Säcke verpackt im Keller der HVA.
Oh, that was really interesting. I went there with a colleague to check it out. He unlocked the basement.
What have we here?
It turned out to be 3.5 tons of blank paper. That was it.
Das war's.
Since no one claimed the paper, the public prosecutor's office said, well, then it belongs to ZERF, or rather, to the Berlin police chief. It's still there, unless it's all been used already.
But ZERF also uncovered plenty of government crimes, and several trails led to a particularly big fish, Alexander Schalk-Golodkowski.
Alexander Schalk-Golodkowski. He led the all-powerful Commercial Coordination Department since 1967, attempting to plug holes in the economy with his business deals.
I think every East German citizen had heard of commercial coordination companies, indirectly at least. One example would be Kunst- und Antiquitäten GmbH, a company that acquired antiques and old items for sale in the West.
This is particularly interesting. Schalk-Golodkowski's company sign for Kunst- und Antiquitäten GmbH. He had many companies, but this was one of them. A large warehouse in northern Berlin. Massive, with loads of shelves. And on these shelves were all kinds of collections, coins, pictures, paintings, lots of porcelain.
Gemälde, alles mögliche Porzellan.
One of the most secret places in East Germany, but a hotspot for antique collectors from all over the world. This company obtained these antiques from the people of East Germany illegally. You could say stole them. There was a system to it. People were told that their collection was now so valuable it had to be taxed. For example, at a rate of 150,000 Ostmarks. And when the collector couldn't pay, the collection was confiscated. If that's not stealing, I don't know what is. And Schalk turned the items into money for the SED, for the party.
You know, things that had happened in East Germany gradually came to light. Things no one knew about. What Schalk Golodkowski did, but also what the SED did with its assets. I sat on a council of elders with old comrades who were also appalled by all the deals the SED had been involved in. And because it wasn't made public all at once, but bit by bit, a deep sense of mistrust developed.
Schalk Golodkowski took the collections from the collectors in East Germany. He took blood from East German citizens to sell in Switzerland. He made money from all kinds of things. And Schalk Golodkowski was the biggest procurer of foreign currency.
The East German mark, or Ostmark, was purely a domestic currency, meaning it couldn't be exchanged for dollars or West German Deutschmarks, for example. If it wanted to purchase any products or raw materials from the West, East Germany had to earn foreign currency, or in other words, hard currency.
Schalk Golodkowski could be called the godfather of Western currency. He managed East Germany's foreign business, then that of the SED.
Schalk Golodkowski raised enough cash to ensure East Germany and the SED didn't go bankrupt.
No one would call him the most powerful man in East Germany, but all those in power at the time were dependent on him. And not just them, Alexander Schalk Golodkowski's empire generated 27 billion Deutschmarks for socialism.
East Germany had been struggling economically for years, and Schalk Golodkowski secured the billion-dollar loan from CSU politician Franz Josef Strauss. Schalk Golodkowski made millions through arms deals. He did all kinds of shady deals with the West German pharmaceutical industry. New drugs trials that were more difficult to conduct in the West after the thalidomide scandal were carried out on patients in East German hospitals. Schalk organized it all, and Western pharmaceutical companies paid huge sums of money that also benefited the SED.
He wrote a doctoral thesis in 1970 describing the more or less legal ways of obtaining foreign currency.
I lived in East Germany and worked and fought for East Germany. I won't deny my past.
Politicians from East and West were happy to finally have a scapegoat. He didn't act alone.
An afternoon on Berlin's Wallstrasse. The building apparently belongs to the Ministry for Foreign Trade, but appearances are deceiving because it was from these rooms that Schalk Golodkowski directed the ominous Commercial Coordination Division.
All lines of inquiry converged on Wallstrasse. Like a spider's web, Schalk Golodkowski linked company holdings together and used straw men and women to conceal how many companies belonged to the Commercial Coordination Department, or COCO, especially in the West. Investigators found at least 150 companies, but the total was probably closer to 200.
I think only one or two people within East Germany were aware of the full extent of Koko's activities. Structures like these are, of course, ideal for concealing financial flows. The flows of money then usually continued via Liechtenstein to Switzerland, from Switzerland to Austria, and from Austria back to East Germany.
The Commission tries to untangle these finance flows as well as the question of what belongs to the state and what belongs to the party. In 1991, it gets a new president, and things get really serious.
I still clearly remember getting a call from the department head at the Interior Ministry. Professor Papier, the people are calling you. Something like that. Not word for word, but something along those lines in a rather theatrical manner. Then he started explaining, well, to be completely honest, I didn't really have a clue about party assets and so on. It was all completely new territory.
I don't know where the Koko money went. I don't think it went to the party. The party did its own business deals. I reckon the funds always went to the state, which used them to cover other expenses.
For East Germany and its key officials, party and state weren't separate at all, were they? So it didn't matter.
At a press conference today, the Treuhand Agency and the Commission of Inquiry outlined this unprecedented initiative. This could well be the most unusual advertisement in German newspaper history. Wanted, East German party assets. In 1994, West Germany offers a 5 million Deutschmark reward for information.
That's what you do when you run out of ideas. You offer a reward to lure people from the PDS involved in the deals.
It was a brazen call for denunciation.
To be honest, it made me smile. I didn't take it seriously.
They closed ranks. They wouldn't have snitched.
In the executive committee meeting, I joked, that's fantastic. If I knew anything, I'd claim the 5 million myself. They're trying to make people think there must still be a lot more to find.
We're still expecting hundreds of millions.
Formally, we had prosecutorial powers, allowing us to search buildings and interview witnesses. We'd been given relatively powerful tools. There were a total of 16 search and seizure operations, carried out in cooperation with public prosecutors and the police.
The suspicion is the SED successor party deliberately provided incomplete information on party assets. In addition to the PDS headquarters in Berlin-Mitte, offices in Dresden, Erfurt, Halle, Rostock, Schwerin and Magdeburg were also searched.
More staff are appointed to the commission.
The independent commission was established in what used to be the East German Interior Ministry, with 116 permanent posts, as far as I know.
The Treuhand Anstalt, as it was then called, was entrusted with the fiduciary management of these particular assets. But that management always had to be carried out in agreement with the independent commission.
The Commission has prosecutorial powers and is charged with the finding and fiduciary management of party assets. But in June 1990, the East German People's Chamber also set up a Treuhandanstalt, or trust agency, with a department also dealing with the assets of party and mass organizations.
Creating a dual responsibility, if you will.
Despite the sometimes rather unclear responsibilities, the two organizations work effectively. Within a very short time, the UKPV initiates 4 searches at PDS-associated properties. I later spoke to several members of the Commission, including someone who'd conducted the PDS searches. We exchanged information, including when I received this briefcase. We looked again to see if we could perhaps still recover some funds.
The Commission's work generally was a success because it was able to either recover many millions or at least locate them.
We're able to say that our investigations have revealed that amounts totaling 840 million were not disclosed to us. Documents show that in December 1989, the SED-PDS party executive decided to utilize party assets to safeguard the party. However, the SED-PDS denies having withheld 840 million marks from the independent commission.
The PDS is ultimately cornered and is willing to forgo most of its assets.
The Independent Commission expressly reaffirms its view that a settlement should create the conditions for the billions in former SED assets to be used for charitable purposes in the new federal states as soon as possible, without years of legal disputes.
The head of the Commission will monitor the disposal of PDS funds and real estate.
The most important thing for me was that in May 1992, I completely renounced all foreign assets belonging to the SED.
That was rather naive, because of course this party was burdened with a huge amount of historical baggage that couldn't simply be shaken off with a piece of legislation.
A reminder, millions were paid out as party loans. Abdel Younes received 75 million marks. It's thought 107 million Deutschmarks were transferred in the Putnik deal. These are financial dealings on a grand scale. But in 1994, the PDS says its pockets are empty. That was when the comrades past caught up with them.
The controversial tax bill was delivered to PDS headquarters in Berlin in November, threatening to ruin the party. It demanded that the PDS pay 67 million marks in back taxes for the first half of 1990.
That was something else. I was flabbergasted, I can tell you. They got a one-page handwritten bill from the tax office. I thought that was just cheeky.
When the tax bill arrived, I went to see André Brie, and he said, "It's a catastrophe." And I said, "Why?" And he replied, "We don't have the 60 million. We'll cease to exist." Then we organized the hunger strike, starting at the Independent Commission, then at the Berlin State Parliament, and afterwards at the Volksbühne Theater.
The Volksbühne program includes the play The Intruder, aptly for the politicians on hunger strike. Tonight they brought beach chairs and sleeping bags, turning the theater into a starvation station. This guest appearance by the PDS is pure coincidence.
We resorted to this because we didn't really have any other ideas. We knew we had to somehow make it public. The party is being destroyed.
The hunger strike becomes a spectacle. It's rare for so many reporters to attend a Volksbühne premiere. The PDS continues to protest against the 67 million mark tax bill, fearing the party's bankruptcy.
Of course, Gregor Gysi's priority was to make headlines and arouse public attention. He also put up a fight in court.
The PDS betraying itself as a victim who'd been wronged, that's clearly a joke. First off, it had more money than any other party. This seems to be a tendency among extreme parties, on both the left and right, to play the victim card.
The PDS and the Berlin Tax Authority fail to reach an agreement. The case goes to court.
The trial was thrilling. I didn't eat for 7 days. I had 2 goals. First, to win the trial, and second, that the blonde judge sitting next to the presiding judge cracks a smile.
In court, Gysi attempted to argue against the UKPV by citing the threat of party bankruptcy.
And then the guy from the Independent Commission said, exactly, that's all you've said so far, but your arguments aren't the least bit credible. So I said, I don't understand, otherwise you believe everything you're told on the phone. She had to smile at that, that's right, I won't forget it. And then I thought, great, you've achieved the first goal, now to tackle the second. Yes, and we won that too.
The court then ruled that this was unlawful and said that the asset question should be clarified in its entirety.
It wasn't as easy to part with this fortune as it perhaps should have been. There are still assets under dispute. A sum running into the hundreds of millions, in fact.
To my knowledge, the fact that there were also offshoots in the Communist Party of Austria and elsewhere was discussed in very small circles within the SED. Members weren't even aware of it.
Berlin-Lichtenberg, Wörnichstraße 69, the Novum Company building. The firm earned hundreds of millions of Deutschmarks in the East German era. The money disappeared. Its trail leads to Vienna. By the summer of 1990, 270 million marks had been transferred to Bank Austria accounts. The suspected mastermind, Rudolfine Steindling.
Novum was a trading company. Thanks to Steindling, it consolidated its influence, eventually becoming the important business partner in major deals between East Germany and Austria. And even, as far as I recall, occasionally for other foreign trade activities.
Whether East Germany is purchasing an entire steel mill from the Austrian steel company voestalpine or selling chemicals to the Swiss pharmaceutical giant Ciba-Geigy, the SED is always involved in the deals through its company Novum.
Rudolfine had her fingers in all the pies, and on the East German side, people always relied on her. She was reliable. And that wasn't initially criminal. The criminal aspect only developed over time.
Rudolfine Steindling took away or made billions disappear in Austria. No one knows where it is.
I've always enjoyed my work. And that's all I've got to say about it.
Alexanderplatz, East Berlin. The Special Assets Department of the Treuhandanstalt is trying to ascertain who really owns Novum, the Austrian Communist Party, or an SED holding company called Zentrag. Agency official Josef Dierdorf thinks he can expose Novum as a front company for the SED.
The evidence was Steindling joined Novum as a trustee, in other words, as a front woman. In this declaration in 1978, she pledged to only follow instructions from SED-owned company Zentrag.
This trustee declaration was totally meaningless.
The dispute goes to court.
I met Rudolfine Steindling twice because I followed 2 days of the trial in Berlin, where she tried to prove that the assets belonged to the Austrian Communist Party and not the SED.
The case went all the way to the Federal Administrative Court, the highest court. It agreed with the Independent Commission and the Treuhandanstalt that Novum had been a fiduciary administration for the benefit of the SED.
She did a great job of clearing out the accounts before the deadlines.
The money was spread across multiple accounts. But the court says it belongs to the Federal Republic of Germany.
Lawsuits have also been initiated against the relevant banks.
Germany is suing the banks involved, AKB and Bank Austria. And in 2012, it won a total of around 253 million euros in damages before the Zurich High Court for breach of financial due diligence obligations. In 2020, this figure was increased by another 139 million euros. The Swiss bank Julius Baer was also ordered to pay damages to Germany. The court told the banks they should have paid closer attention.
We've seen the recent release of even more funds from Switzerland, some of which have even been made available for historical reappraisal initiatives.
390 million euros have been recovered in the Novum scandal, not from Red Fini herself, but through bank liability. Nearly 130 million euros are still missing. Abdel Yunus has repaid several million, but a portion is still missing, possibly held in unknown accounts. By 2023, a total of around 1.5 billion euros of former SED party assets had been transferred to the Federal Republic of Germany. Depending on population distribution, most of the money will be shared among the new federal states for charitable purposes. But is that really all of it?
It's safe to assume that assets are still hidden somewhere in one or more foreign accounts, because it just wasn't possible to investigate everything. Sometimes someone buries something and forgets to mention it, and you only find it decades or so later.
For me, the story isn't over. There's still money in accounts somewhere, and not just a little. And these accounts are somewhere abroad, in the hands of people who aren't entitled to them.